Hello and welcome to this module where we are going to discuss stock replenishment methods. One of the main objectives of inventory management is to ensure that stock is available whenever it is required, either for production or for sale. However, the facilities that are required for keeping stock are not cheap, and therefore one needs to ensure that while they do not keep too much excess stock, they also never run out of stock. Maintaining this balance can be complicated, it can be complex, especially in a situation where the supply is not always guaranteed. So in that case, you may not be able to apply textbook methods, because a textbook method assumes that all things are working perfectly. So if supply is not guaranteed, some conventional methods of stock replenishment may not work perfectly for you. Also, in situations where there is high inflation and the prices are changing constantly, you'll discover that companies would like to buy a lot in bulk so that they protect themselves against future price increases. Also, when items are being imported and the transaction cost is high, you do not want to be ordering every week or every month, because the cost of importation can become prohibitive. So you might end up having to keep a lot of stock at hand, whereas your actual requirement does not really need that much stock. One therefore needs to use a replenishment method that ensures that they can meet their stock requirements and at the same time they do not overstock. You might have come across the term safety stock. This is the amount of stock that we carry in excess or over and above our expected usage during the lead time to provide a cushion against running out of stock. In other words, when we order materials from our suppliers, we expect those goods will arrive on time. But just in case they do not arrive on time, we want to make sure that we do not run out of stock while we are waiting. So we keep a certain quantity on the side that we call safety stock. So we fall back on it when our suppliers let us down. This is because demand and stock usage cannot be known with certainty. And there is also a degree of uncertainty that is associated with placing an order and receiving delivery of stock from your suppliers. There is another concept of economic order quantity. While investment in stocks represent a major asset, it is essential that stocks are managed efficiently so that such investments do not become unnecessarily large. An optimum stock level must be determined, which ensures that you always have sufficient stock to meet requirements for production and sale, and it also ensures that you avoid holding surplus stock, which is unnecessary and increases the risk of obsolescence. So while the actual process of determining an economic order quantity is complex, it suffices to say that it involves a trade-off between the cost of holding a large quantity of stock and the cost of ordering small quantities of stock many times. So we are trying to determine what is the optimum order quantity when we are buying stock. What is the best quantity to order? So the economic order quantity would be that quantity that ensures that you are meeting all your needs, but at the same time you are not overstocking. Experience is usually the best guide when it comes to economic order quantity. You can use all the science and mathematics you want, but without history information which tells you the trend of usage within your organization, you will not be able to come up with the best order quantity. So you are better off looking at your history and your reports, and you see the trend of usage. You should know that every year when it comes to October, November, December, there is a spike in demand. You will know that every year in January, February, there is a dip in demand. So those history reports help you to plan for the future so that you don't keep repeating the same mistakes of either over ordering or under ordering. The other considerations that we need to make when we determine stock levels are, firstly, uncertainty of future supplies. In other words, if you are not very sure about the future supply of a certain item, for example, if a major supplier is facing closure or strike action, you do not have certainty that that supplier will always be there to provide you with those materials. Also, future supplies may be restricted because of import and transport problems as well. They may also be restricted even by pandemics that close and lock down borders. So in anticipation of such circumstances, an organization may overorder to ensure that they have sufficient stocks for production of sales, just in case there is a crisis with their supplier. There is also the risk of future price increases, which is the inflation we mentioned a bit earlier on. It may be in a firm's interest to buy in excess of its immediate requirements if a price increase is announced for a future date. There is an incentive for holding large stocks in times of rapid inflation. So you know that the price is changing every week or every month. You can buy in bulk at a lower price so that you cushion yourself against future price increases. There are also instances where the probability or risk of obsolescence is high, or the goods are of a perishable nature. In that case, you need to purchase frequently and in small quantities, because at any time you might discover that technology which you are using is out of date. So you do not want to buy 1,000 cartridges for a particular printer, because in just a few weeks or a few months, a new version of the printer is going to come up and your people are going to start asking for the new version. So if you had bought hundreds of cartridges for a printer that becomes obsolete, you also lose that stock that is no longer useful. Let us now look at stock replenishment methods. Here we discuss a number of methods that are used for determining when stock must be replenished. In other words, we want to know at what stage do we buy more stock. Remember, one of the key performance indicators was stock turnover, which is counting the number of times that we've reordered or replaced stock on the shelf because it has been used up or because it has been sold. The first method is the maximum minimum method, also known as the reorder level method. For each single item, we set various levels for controlling transactions for that particular item. Firstly, we set a minimum level. When we set a minimum level, we are saying the total balance of the item is not allowed to go below that minimum level. So if, for example, for one item we put a minimum level of 10, it means that the balance for that item can never be less than 10. Then we also set a maximum level. With the maximum level, we are saying the total balance of the item is not allowed to go above or to exceed that maximum level. So we can have a minimum level of 10 and a maximum level of 100. So in other words, we are saying that our stock balance must always play between 10 and 100, never below 10 and never above 100. Then we have a reorder level. This is the balance at which we need to place a new order. In other words, we could say once the total balance for this item reaches 25, we place a new order, because we want to ensure that by the time the goods arrive, we still have enough stock not to go below the minimum level. We then calculate the maximum order quantity. So the maximum order for the item is that quantity that ensures that when the order is received, the total balance will not exceed the maximum level. So logically, you can see that the maximum order quantity has to be the maximum level minus the reorder level. So this page illustrates this example with a minimum level of 10, a reorder level of 25, and maximum level of 100. So we calculate the maximum order quantity as 100 minus 25, which ensures that even if the order arrives when we still have the 25, we are not going to exceed 100. Because if, for example, we ordered 76 items, and then after placing the order, nobody uses the item, then we receive the 76 items, the total will now be 101. So the maximum order quantity must be such that this maximum level will never be exceeded. So we set our maximum order quantity as 75. Then the reorder level is also determined by some kind of formula, because we want to have enough stock to use while we are waiting for the order, such that as we are using it, we will never go below the minimum level before the order comes. What we do is we take into consideration what is the lead time for that supplier. If the supplier takes 5 days to deliver, and every day we use 3 items, it means that we will need a total of 15 items to use during the lead time. We now add that 15 to the minimum level of 10, and that gives us the reorder level of 25. You can even decide to push that reorder level to 30 or 35, so that you have got a buffer or safety stock. So 25 should be the lowest reorder level in this situation, where you need 3 items per day and there is a waiting period of 5 days after we place our order. So these levels, they are not just guesses. You actually calculate them. You determine them from the lead time of your supplier, so that by the time they deliver the order, you still are within your safety zone. So this is the maximum, minimum, or your reorder level method. Another replenishment method is material requirements planning. So MRP originated in the early 60s as a computerized approach for coordinating the planning of materials acquisition and production. It provides the basis for production scheduling and raw material purchasing. So MRP will first determine the quantities and timing of finished goods requirements and uses this to determine the requirements of raw materials. So earlier on we were talking about the bill of quantities for that product A. So what we are now saying is MRP will determine how many of that finished product are required, and also the timing, when are they required. And from those quantities and timing, it will now calculate based on the bill of materials when we need the various raw materials. So the MRP makes use of the bill of materials, which breaks the requirements for each product into its primary sub-assemblies, which are in turn further separated into second, third, and so forth levels of subcomponents. The lowest level consists only of purchased items, which are the direct materials or your raw materials. So earlier on, we used the bill of quantities for determining the cost of materials in manufacturing, but this time we will be using the bill of quantities to determine the actual quantity of materials that are required. So MRP makes use of that bill of quantities. So this is our example of product A that is made of two levels. First level with items B and C, and second level with items D, E, F, and G. Then next we have our spreadsheet that now shows us how many of each item are required to make its parent and also to make the finished product. So we now have the requirement or the order. If the client now says, I want one item, we now say these are the quantities of each material required to make one item. But if they say, I want two items, these will be the quantities of each raw material required. So it's simply a matter of multiplying the items required to make a parent and to make the end product. Then you multiply it by the quantity of the end product that you need. So at the end of the day, for products that are very sophisticated with many levels, right? Some have got thousands of levels. If you consider an aircraft, for example, it will have thousands of levels of components, and you cannot use any manual method to determine the quantity of materials required to make an aircraft. You need a bill of quantities and material requirements planning. So the way that MRP works is that after it is calculated how much of each item is required to fulfill the order, it now goes through a process to determine how much we actually need to buy for that item. So in our case, we would like to take the example of item E, and we need to make two end products A. So from our previous table, if we are making two end products, then for E we need 12 items. So that is the total requirement for E is 12 in order for us to make 2 of the end product A. Now MRP will check how many items are in stock currently. Let's say, for example, it finds we already have 5 of E in stock. In that case, it will then determine of that 5 which are in stock, is there any other order which have already booked these materials? Let's say it finds that 3 of these items are already booked for another job. Then in that case, it will know that there is only 2 items that are available for our order. In which case, from the 12, we now have a requirement of 10 because 2 are already in stock. We then check if there are any purchase orders that have already been placed for this item E, because we might have already placed an order and we are just waiting for the supplier to deliver. Let's say we find that there are 5 items that are available on order. Now we can see that there are 2 items in stock plus the 5 that are on order. So which means that 7 items are already available for this job, 2 in stock and 5 which are on order and they are not committed. So we now want to determine how many items we need to order from scratch. So this now leaves us with a balance of the original 12 items. We subtract the 2 and the 5, which makes it 7. So 12 minus 7, we end up with 5 items that still need to be ordered. So this value of 5 is what we call the net purchasing requirement. So from an initial requirement of 12, we have looked around, we have seen we already have some materials available. Some are already on order. So we don't need to buy the whole 12 from scratch. So we have determined that we need a net purchasing quantity of 5. So now we can place a purchase order for the 5 items or more so that we can have some to keep in stock. So MRP is an automated calculator. It has got complex tables that come from the bill of quantities. So I already gave you a very simple example of a table that is derived from the bill of quantities. It is automatic. You don't sit down to say, now I'm doing MRP, because otherwise you'll spend the rest of your life doing requirements for some sophisticated items. So it is a computerized approach. All you do is simply feed in the bill of quantities, the bill of materials. Once the bill of materials is in, then it's just a matter of saying how many quantities you want to make of the finished product. At one time I was reading that the reason why countries have to place orders for aircraft, say 10 years in advance, is because of this planning process that is so long. If you can imagine the millions of different components that go into the bill of quantities for one aircraft, you will have thousands of people who are sitting down just punching into the computer these materials, and then once they've finished punching them in, they have to be verified, they have to correct mistakes and so forth. So it takes years and years before they actually have a fully functional bill of quantities for a single aircraft. So in that case, you would not survive at all if you are going to do your planning and your designing manually. MRP is a very useful tool, especially in the manufacturing environment, where you don't have time to sit down to calculate the quantities that you need, because orders are coming in constantly. So you, as the stores controller, you don't have time to be sitting down and calculating that client wants 20 bags, so I need this material. The next client wants so many t-shirts, therefore I need these materials. So you definitely need an automated helper in the form of MRP, or materials requirements planning. So this is a sophisticated stock replenishment method. Then we also have what is called just-in-time purchasing technique. The objective of just-in-time purchasing is to purchase goods so that delivery immediately precedes their use. So the main objective is to ensure that we do not hold stock at hand. So we want to place an order so that the moment that the goods arrive, already the production process is ready to consume those goods. We achieve just in time by working with suppliers so that they deliver frequent small quantities which are just sufficient to meet our immediate production requirements. So this technique was started and used mostly by Japanese car manufacturers. So what would happen is they would go into a contract with suppliers of materials. So the supplier would actually come and build their warehouse inside the factory. So the car manufacturer does not own the materials, but they are inside their factory and they are managed by the supplier of the materials. What happens is that they connect their production system to the inventory system of the supplier. Whenever they are planning production and creating the schedules of materials required, those schedules are communicated to the supplier. So the supplier already knows tomorrow this is the production plan in the factory, therefore they need to deliver these quantities. So you can see that just in time only works in a situation where supply can be guaranteed. In other words, where you do not have uncertainty. If you are not sure of the supply, you cannot use just-in-time purchasing technique. One day you just wake up and your supplier does not have stock. Besides substantially reducing investments in raw materials, just-in-time also results in substantial savings in factory space. So you don't need to hire huge factories to keep your raw materials, because you know that your supplier will be on your doorstep the moment that you need to use the materials. So the method that you use for replenishing stock in your organization basically depends on the type of operation that you are involved in. If it is an ordinary office environment, then you can use the maximum, minimum, and reorder levels. You don't need to bother yourself with material requirements planning and just-in-time purchasing technique. But if you are into manufacturing and you've got sophisticated product structures, in that case, you definitely need bill of materials. You need material requirements planning in order to calculate the quantities as well as timing of raw material purchases. In the next module, we are going to look at various management reports that we can generate from the various aspects of our stock management system. So I'll see you in the next module.